going to get this meeting started here. Representative Rowe, if you could lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. If we could have the members introduce themselves, starting with Representative Rigby.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Jim Rigby, State Representative, 71st District. That would be Cambria and Somerset counties.
Good morning, everyone. State Representative Robert Ledbetter, representing the 109th District, entire Columbia County.
Good morning, Representative David Rowe from the 85th Legislative District that comprises Southern Union County, all of Snyder, and the eastern parts of Juniata and Mifflin counties.
Representative Josh Kale, Beaver, Washington counties.
Good morning. Representative Mike Cabell, representing the 117th District, Luzerne County, including Salem Township.
Good morning, everyone. Jamie Barton, representing the 124th Legislative District. That's Southern Schuylkill County and Northern Berks County.
Good morning. Thomas Kutz, 87th District, Cumberland County.
Doyle Heffley, 122nd District, all of Carbon County.
And online, we also have Representative Twardzik. Representative.
Good morning. I'm Tim Twardzik from the exciting 123rd District in Schuylkill County. Sorry I can't be there in person, but I have the pleasure of delivering a 100th birthday citation a little later on this morning.
All right. And Representative Marcel, if you'd like to introduce yourself briefly.
Hi, I'm Kristen Marcel from the 178th District from Bucks County. Sorry I'm a few minutes late. I missed my exit, so thank you.
Happens to the best of us. Representative Cabell, thank you for having us here in your district. You have been a leader on energy issues since the time you came into the House of Representatives. I'm looking forward to having this conversation here. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So when the policy committee reached out to me and they wanted to know if I was interested in hosting a policy hearing, and if so, where would we do it and who would we involve, the answer was really easy. Salem Township, this little part of they call part of it East Berwick, neighboring my colleague here, Representative Ledbetter. If you know the local area, this is Energy Town, USA. It really is. It's unbelievable that in this little municipality we have Caithness, which is natural gas generation, and we also have Talon Energy right in our backyard. So we're Talon Energy is a nuclear power plant, and with that comes incredible opportunity for this municipality, for the county, and for the Commonwealth itself. So again, there was no question as to where I was going to have the hearing. So we had a dinner last night, and we talked a lot about energy in Pennsylvania and the future of Pennsylvania as a leader in this United States as far as energy is concerned. I just spoke in front of the Chamber of Commerce this morning in Greater Hazleton area, and you have a bunch of business owners there that are worried about the future of the financial outlook for the state and for the country. We are in an inflationary environment right now, and what's our biggest bill in our households? A lot of times it's energy, it's our electricity costs, and we have a governor right now that is touting a energy plan that would be really, really harmful, and not to mention we're still facing Reggie directly in the eyes here. So I want to thank the policy committee. I want to thank Chairman Kale for making this our focus right now, because ultimately the Republican Party is for the consumer. We want to do everything we can to bring those bills down, because we know that at bills across the board, you go to the grocery store, you're spending double, triple for groceries. You get health insurance. It's double or triple what it was before the Affordable Health Care Act. So across the board, we're spending more and more and more. So we have to partner with private industry. We have to partner with the natural gas industry, the nuclear power industry, and we have to make sure that that not only are we bringing more sustainable growth into Pennsylvania, but exporting this energy? We have all this energy under our feet, and there's nothing we could do with it, and it's a travesty. So the theme of the dinner last night was, how do we get the word out? And this is how we get the word out. And I just want to thank the policy committee for picking this area, Luzerne County, specifically Salem Township, because as you guys will hear here, Salem Township and Luzerne County in Pennsylvania is open for business, and this is how we attract businesses. This is how we drop prices across the board. So again, thank you for coming to my district.
Thank you, Representative. And you hit the nail on the head. An individual that testifies in front of our committee often and has become a friend of growth in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, a gentleman by the name of David Taylor, always says that, the energy industry is only 7% of the economy. I think it's 7. I don't know the exact number, something like that. But he makes the point, but it's the first 7% of the economy. It touches everything. So it's not just electricity costs going up. It's transportation costs. And if transportation costs are going up, that means that your groceries are going to be going up. And everything that's touched and everything that's bought and consumed within the marketplace is touched by energy. And we have put a lot of challenges on ourselves, we being state government, not we being Republicans. We've certainly fought against it. So let me rephrase that. Democrats have put a lot of challenges upon our own industries here. But quite frankly, the answer is Pennsylvania energy. We have the answer beneath us. And you're exactly right to make that point. The world is a better place when we are using and consuming Pennsylvania energy. It's a better place from a consumer standpoint. It's a better place from a job standpoint for us. And it's also a better place from an environmental standpoint. So I am looking forward to hearing from our testifiers today. Today we have 3 testifiers joining us. All will share insight into the status of Pennsylvania energy and what can be done to decrease consumer costs. Each testifier will share with us their brief testimony, approximately 3 to 5 minutes. I got to tell you, though, I've never gavelled anybody out, and I don't intend on gaveling anybody out. But if you could keep it within that time frame, it would be appreciated. If you go over a little bit, it's no big deal. I'm not here with a clock. And then we'll open it up for answers. So our testifiers, we have Mr. Mike Butler, the Executive Director of the Mid-Atlantic Consumer Energy Alliance, Jack Monahan, right? Is that right? Monahan? Sorry about that. The General Man. I consistently butcher names in these series. Where's Representative Eckert? Anyway. And Frank Polidora, Supervisor, Butler Township. Yeah, that's right. Mr. Butler, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman Kale, and for members of the committee for hosting this event and inviting me to testify today. I am the Mid-Atlantic Director for the Consumer Energy Alliance. I live in Pittsburgh, and I cover Pennsylvania, Maryland, New Jersey, Delaware. But as an organization, we work across the United States. In short, we are all of the above energy advocacy. Our primary focus is any potential energy legislation or policy is looked at through the prism of affordability and reliability. And today I'm going to focus my remarks, but happy to take questions on any topic, but we'll focus my remarks on kind of what's coming down the pike on electric vehicles and some of the things we've seen in other states as hopefully to help raise a warning flag for Pennsylvania not to mimic what some of our fellow states have done. Certainly consumers are becoming more accepting of electric vehicles, and in part that is driven by taxpayer-funded incentives to expand the industry. But we caution that policymakers and legislatures be increasingly mindful not to put the cart before the horse when it comes to centrally planned mandates that attempt to drive consumers to purchase products they aren't ready to accept, can't currently afford, and face significant supply chain bottlenecks that are already limiting supply and increasing costs. There are substantial infrastructure investments that will be required, including the EV charging network and further the electric generation's transmission and distribution systems that will need to be built and widespread before full adoption can occur. States that have moved to ban gasoline and diesel-powered vehicles and forcing consumers to purchase EVs before states have the requisite infrastructure needed to support this will imperil our electric grid. The PGM, where we are, is already facing very significant strains on the system. This is only going to exacerbate that. These policies will be disadvantageous for consumers and the economy in terms of grid reliability and cost considerations. During the last decade, as public policy action on climate and the environment has migrated from the federal to state levels, the automotive sector has found itself the subject of new regulations that could shake up the industry. Where once it was incremental increases in the corporate average fuel economy standards at the federal level that had the most impact on the industry, we now have EV mandates in place in several states and under consideration in quite a few more. Many of these mandates have been handed down without adequate cost benefit or market impact analysis. Massachusetts and New York, for example, have both enacted legislation banning new registrations of internal combustion engine light-duty vehicles starting in 2035. California has pursued an EV mandate through executive order and regulatory restrictions to put in effect by the California Air Resources Board that will ban the sales of internal combustion engine vehicles as soon as 2035. Other states opting into the California ICE ban or setting informal goals and targets include New Mexico, which recently set a goal of having 7% of all new vehicle sales of EVs by 2025. Michigan has set a goal of 2 million EVs on the road by 2030. Another half dozen states have set more modest targets, mostly by 2030 or 2035. The EPA has released 2 new emissions rules that require 60% of all new vehicles sold to be only electric vehicles by 2030 and 67% by 2032. While there are clearly many reasons to pursue EVs over the long term and to expand mobility options, the push by many elected officials toward mandates or targeted EV sales by certain dates often fail to take into account many of the real-world economic, social, and practical problems created by these sorts of regulations. Too often, the consumer is completely left out of the discussion. What is also frequently left out of discussions are advances in new technologies, such as low-carbon fuels, hybrid electric vehicles, and fuel cells that are moving us towards a lower-emission future, while also offering families and businesses multiple and sometimes better choices to meet their driving needs and continue our march toward meeting our environmental goals. It is becoming increasingly clear that policymakers are not fully considering all the implications of aggressively mandating EVs. The risk to near and long-term consumer acceptance of EVs increases the likelihood of unintended consequences, causing an overall negative reaction to the increased utilization of EVs. To avoid this possible outcome, policymakers should more carefully consider several critically important issues. For example, what is a realistic time frame for the United States to move to its fleet to an all-electric vehicles? What is the true cost to consumers of moving from internal combustion engine-powered vehicles to electric vehicles? What electric identification requirements are necessary to power a move to electric vehicles? What transmission investments are required to ensure consumers are able to conveniently charge electric vehicles? Is the supply chain for electric vehicles more or less advantageous to the national security prospects of the United States in comparison to internal combustion energy vehicles? With state transportation budgets primarily financed by gas and diesel fuel taxes, how will governments ensure our transportation infrastructure is adequately mandated? How does the transition to vehicle affordability affect equitable job growth in the United States? Is due consideration being given to EV affordability and current taxpayer-funded incentives, which at present can only be available by higher income earners and not the majority of Americans? These are just a few of the many questions that we would be confronted with, and I'd encourage, as these things make their way around the states, including Pennsylvania, that these things are taken into consideration and we have a more practical, realistic, productive conversation about the future of our transportation and vehicles. Happy to take any questions, and again, happy to broaden out the topics beyond this, but I wanted to utilize my time to kind of wave this flag of caution.
Thank you. Mr. Monahan?
Okay, good morning. Chairman Kale, Representative Cabell, and members of the Pennsylvania House Republican Policy Committee, thank you for the invitation of joining you this morning for this critically important discussion about energy policy and its impact on generating facilities and the consumers. My name is Jack Monahan. I am the General Manager of Operations for Caithness Energy. Caithness is a privately held independent power producer specializing in the development, acquisition, operation, and management of renewable energy and natural gas projects. Caithness and its affiliates have successfully developed, operated, and owned interest in over 50 operating power projects. These include 6,000 megawatts of gas turbine projects, 1,190 megawatts of wind projects, 495 megawatts of geothermal projects, 160 megawatts of solar projects, as well as a 110-mile, 230,000-volt transmission line running from Dixie Valley, Nevada, to Bishop, California. In 2015, we partnered with a project developer named Moxie Energy to finance and break ground on the Freedom Generating Station right down the road from here in Salem Township, Pennsylvania. We could not be more grateful for the support we received from our state elected officials, including Representative Mike Cabell, Senator Linda Culver, as well as their predecessors, Senator Gordner and Representative Toohill. We've also had a great relationship with the Salem Township officials and emergency responders at both police and the fire departments. After a 34-month construction period, the facility went into commercial operation in 2018, generating more than 1,100 megawatts of reliable power. This is enough electricity to meet the needs of approximately 9,000 homes and businesses in our region. We are using Pennsylvania's natural gas to generate clean and reliable power that we sell into the PJM interconnection market to supply electricity to consumers. The investment into the facility is nearly $1 billion, financed by private capital. This is an important distinction for us to make because with Pennsylvania's competitive market structure, the financial risk for building new power generation resources falls on investors and not the ratepayers. We invested in Pennsylvania for several different reasons, including competitive energy market structure, the access to natural gas resources, existing natural gas and electricity infrastructure, and the skilled workforce to build, operate, and maintain the state-of-the-art power plant at our generating facility. Our investments continue to drive economic activity, generate significant tax revenue, and contribute to local charities and community organizations. The construction phase of the project supported an average of 250 jobs, with as many as 600 jobs at our peak construction. Construction payroll totaled approximately $80 million, most of which was paid to regional contractors. Our plant is highly automated and extremely efficient, with well over 3,000 data points coming back to our Operations Control Center, where we monitor and manage the plant. We employ 24 full-time operators at a high-paying wage to manage the operations of our facility. Also, during semi-annual extended shutdowns, we bring an additional 30 to 100 building trade members to our facility to support large maintenance activities. In total, through our regular annual maintenance program, our facility generates approximately $20 million annually in economic activity, with about half of that money being spent locally. We also contribute approximately $850,000 in state, county, and local taxes. We also strive to be a good community neighbor by giving back to the community. Last year alone, we contributed $40,000 to local charities, community organizations, and meeting our long-term commitment to the Salem Township Fire Department. In total, the Freedom Team has supported several public improvement projects locally, totaling more than $800,000 designated for completed community projects and future commitments. Beyond our community partnerships, we are also stewards of the environment. Freedom Generating Station is one of the most efficient power facilities in the entire PJM system, therefore minimizing emissions because of our efficient operations. Overall, the influx of natural gas power generation statewide has greatly improved the environmental impacts of power generation in Pennsylvania. In fact, from 2005 to 2020, natural gas power generation increased by 52%, while greenhouse gas emissions from power generation decreased by 44% over the same period. While older power generating plants operate around 30 to 50% of efficiency, our plant operates at 60%. That means we are generating more power using fewer resources and generating less emissions per unit of energy produced. On the emission sides, by utilizing state-of-the-art technology, Freedom produces significantly fewer emissions per megawatt hour generated than older coal and natural gas power generators in Pennsylvania, some of which produce more than double the CO2 emissions that we produce at our facility. Freedom also deploys dry cooling technology, which allows us to utilize 95% lower amounts of water than the plant of similar size that uses traditional wet cooling technology. Consumer demand for electricity is expected to continue to rise. Our environmentally sustainable facility has the flexibility to help meet that demand and to adapt and integrate new technologies as they evolve, such as hydrogen fuel blending and carbon capture. Pennsylvania's competitive energy market structure, combined with its infrastructure, local access to natural resources, and the skilled workforce, is primed to attract new investment in the new power generation and the related technologies. However, as investors, we are constantly evaluating energy markets, both in the short and long term. A $1 billion investment has a decades-long payback period, and the decision to finance and invest is predicated on a market that is predictable and stable. To that end, any policy changes to market rules impact our investments. I look forward to the discussion today, and I'm happy to answer any questions from the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Doctor?
Thank you very much, lady and gentlemen, for letting me testify. I'm a retired orthopedic surgeon, and I've been a supervisor since 2013. I'll jump right in here. I had our manager run by our electricity costs, and as you can see, between last year and the year before, they went up 18% for our institutional uses and a whopping 26% for our sewage plant. Interestingly, when you look at the history of things, comparing 2020 and 2021, we actually went down 5% before it started going up for the institutional. I thought that was a typo on the part of my manager. So what happened there? Well, one thing that happened was an administration changed in Washington. So is correlation, is it causation? But you know, our sewage plant, I'm not sure how much this is, you know, new equipment or other things going on, but you know, definitely we're spending a lot of money on electricity for that. As I've written here, the cost of fuel, gasoline, and diesel has increased for our vehicles, even though we don't pay the state income tax, our state sales tax. But you know, just looking at my log on 12/15/20, December 15th, 20, gas was $2.35 9/10. I bought it yesterday. It's $3.52 9/10. Now you can do the math, and you know, even if you subtract this taxes and things, there's a big increase there. Roads are more expensive. We have to buy asphalt and things like that. As someone mentioned, you know, energy's in everything, energy and oil's in everything. And if the price of that stuff goes up, or if it isn't there anymore, then we have more problems. I brought up these things about unfunded mandates because DEP is the one that wants to run this show if the governor's PACER situation gets put into play. And the MS4 thing to me is something that's not well run. We're a relatively rural community, but part of us is considered urban. And if you look at the map, it's a map of the census, and they gerrymandered it so that part of our township is considered urban. The EP runs that. And now we had a situation in Butler Township where we have a community center, and we tested every month, and some coliforms were determined. No one's gotten sick, and I think we tested it again and it wasn't, but DEP said we had to get a new well. But the well would have been drilled in the same place, the same depth, and it would cost us, what, $30,000 or more. So we had no choice but to basically have people not drink water there and bring bottled water. But they were irrational in their demands. So DEP needs to be controlled. And the reason I'm saying this, whatever is going to happen with energy, bureaucracy has to be controlled. You ladies and gentlemen have to take back your prerogative to prevent administrative law from running running over us. Okay, solar farms. A few years ago, someone wanted to put a solar farm in Butler Township, and if we looked into it, it would have involved zoning changes, but we saw that nothing of benefit would occur to Butler Township. No increased jobs, no increased taxation, and no decreased energy costs. As a matter of fact, my impression with this situation was, you and I get together and we decide we're going to put a solar farm. We get all the stuff, all the changes made, and then we sell it to you. We didn't do anything, and then we sell it to you, and we sell it to you. We don't know who's going to get this, but it would have given no benefit to Butler Township. And as it's been brought out, there's more and more electricity needed to run anything, including our township. I'll move on to the next thing. I'm here as a doctor. I'm here as a supervisor and a private citizen. My wife and I have lived in Butler since 1980, and we're old enough to see things change. Inflation, energy costs, price of oil. We have oil heat, and we have a very efficient heat pump. It doesn't kick on until freezing, and it keeps our costs down. God bless. And that sort of thing. But, as I put on here, there were our costs. I mean, you could say they're modest, not modest, but for some people that are living on a fixed income, they're not modest. And interestingly, about the cost per kilowatt hour in the beginning of 2023, as you can see, it was 8.315 cents per kilowatt hour. And then the company that we had the contract with wanted to raise it to 17.3. That's over double. So we looked for another one, but we had to be with PP&L for a little bit, and they charged us 12.29 kilowatt, and this is for generation. And then we found one that was 10.18 cents per kilowatt hour. Interestingly, the company that was raising it double, maybe again, here we go, correlation. They talked about green energy, and they talked about a situation where they had different levels of participation in green energy. And depending on what you did, you could get a credit for if they put a solar farm someplace else. And I don't know what the credit was, if it was for on your taxes or if it was for your bill or something of that sort. But the point I'm making is that 17 cents, how much that rate was going to subsidize green energy. Electric bills, I went through, I'm doing my taxes this time of the year, so I have this data available, and I looked through our electric bills. And I don't know if you looked at your electric bill, but they're very confusing. There's stuff in there, and I have it down there, and I don't know what it means. I did notice something, though, that I don't pay. I'm not a commercial business, so I don't pay a sales tax on the generation of power. But unless I'm wrong, if you're a business, you pay 6% of whatever you bill. Now that passes, that's going to get passed on to all the consumers. But I would say, maybe you should look into electric bills. And is there any way to bundle these things in a way that everyone knows what they're paying and why they're paying it? And, as far as taxes on businesses, why is there a sales tax on to businesses? The other thing is, when I'm talking about the cost here, I'm talking about, if I'm running over, shut me up. I'm talking about the generation cost. I'm not talking about the transmission cost. And or whatever you want to call it, whatever you want to call it, distribution, but it's roughly 4.66 cents per kilowatt. I looked at our bills. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. So it would be nice if you could basically point that out to people when you're getting your power. Hey, you're going to be paying this, and that, they put it on there, but a lot of people don't look at that stuff. What else? I talked about that. Okay, so basically, as was said, we want our electricity, just like in the township, we want it to be dependable and inexpensive, and our other forms of energy. And we looked at what happened with the brownouts and blackouts in California, and these guys, with the grid getting overstimulated. We looked at the Texas, where I think some people died because of the cold. I read something, or I read a lot of stuff. In Canada, this past winter, they had a situation where they had wind, and they couldn't turn the windmills on because if they get too cold, they'll crack. So they got energy. Guess where they got their energy from? From us, just like their medical care. So in summary, I did read about the governor's Emissions Reduction Act, and I don't think it's realistic. It's a three-legged stool. They're going to clean up things. They're going to save energy jobs, and they're going to keep energy cheap, or inexpensive. I don't think that's possible. And I've gone into other things in here. I'll put on my third hat. I'm a physician. I read scientifically. I read journals. I read whatever. And I've been looking at this situation with, I'll call it global warming, for many years. And I put a lot of stuff in here for you guys to look at. But I've been told I shouldn't say this, but I'll say it. I don't think the CO2 increase is the cause of our warming. I think this is a natural process that recurs, and I've mentioned it in here. And this is all based on, not me, but on what I read by scientists. And it's not based on models. It's based on observing things like ice cores and sediment and coral and tree rings and fossils and pollen, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the problem with we have right now is the governor and the people that are pushing green energy are basically looking for a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. And I'll stop right there. Thank you.
All right. I do want to mention that a couple of us have been looking over at the window. There's a bird over there that seems to want to participate in the hearing. It keeps. Maybe it just likes you, Jim. Representative Rigby. That's right. That's right. Representative Cabell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you again to the testifiers. I do want to thank Mr. Monahan and Caithness. We call you Moxie Freedom around here. For your investment, like you had mentioned, into the community. A couple months ago, we unveiled a fire truck that you guys helped the municipality obtain. So again, thank you for your investment, and that's what we need as far as we have folks coming in here, providing a service, making money, but also giving back to the community. So I want to applaud you quickly for that. Thank you. So we talked a little bit, and in your testimony, Mr. Monahan, you said the risk of investment should fall on investors, not ratepayers, through subsidies and cost pass-throughs. That I couldn't agree more with that. And we're actually recently, in the last year or two, the so-called Inflation Reduction Act was passed in the United States, which part of that is trickling down into the states and allowing for consumers to buy subsidized, all sorts of subsidized equipment, mostly electric. And it's frustrating because they're saying you could buy this electric stove, and get the subsidy, but you can't buy a equally efficient and inexpensive, quite frankly, gas stove. So it's again frustrating. So my question to you guys, and I'll quickly also go back to Dr. Polidoro mentioned the rolling blackouts that had happened. And I remember we had a hearing here about a year ago up in the northern part of my district, and we were talking about how California was pushing for electric vehicles to be the norm, but yet last summer when they were having issues with the grid and power, they were asking people not to plug in their electric vehicles. I actually own an electric vehicle, but I also I understand that electricity has to come from somewhere. And I have a colleague that jokes that his Tesla's coal powered. I'm bouncing around a little bit, but I would like to come back to, and this is to Mr. Monahan or Mr. Butler. What investments do you guys see that are needed? Because another thing that I've heard from like the more of the rural folks is that the grid is not going to be able to sustain the demand that is needed. But, there's 30 different pieces of electronics that are plugged into my house at all times. That wasn't like 30, 40 years ago. We didn't have that. So just basic home demand. But then you add on obviously the EVs and other things. The grid, from what I understand, is not going to be able to handle this. So how could we invest? How could we partner with you guys to invest in the grid? And do you see any options, any ideas that how we could really get to a point where we're not going back to the ratepayers and the taxpayers, but we get investments from private folks to build out the grid so we can get the electricity to the folks that want it and need it?
Well, thank you. Those are great questions. I didn't want to get bogged down too much in stats in my opening remarks, but to kind of put into context, just on the electric vehicle side, the type of investment that would be needed. If we just looked at light-duty trucks, which are the kind of first on the chopping block, currently they in a given year account for over 2.8 trillion miles that are traveled. If that would all flipped over from gas-powered, diesel-powered to all-electric vehicles, it would require over 1 trillion kilowatts a year of new generation. 1 trillion kilowatts. That's the equivalent of 122 new nuclear stations. It is the engineering challenge that we have in front of us is astronomical. At the low end, the lowest of low ends, the upgraded to transmission distribution systems would easily be calculated, again, just on those light-duty vehicles, over $75 billion. And that's just to hit these 2030 targets. So not to be too pessimistic, but the scale that we are trying to embark on is gargantuan, and it's really not something that can be done. One state can't take that on itself. So the timelines are they're entirely impractical. And again, the grid's under incredible strain right now. Even if we weren't going down this electrification path, because of other environmental policies, we've had these premature plant closures. There's nothing coming online to offset that. So like in California, which is by far New York's up there too, but a very aggressive state on environmental mandates, are desperately trying to get these plants to extend their lives because they will be faced with rolling brownouts and blackouts. I mean, you're talking about the 6th largest economy in the world that'll be basically having an electrification system that mirrors the third world. I mean, that is what they have very deliberately set themselves on that path, and it's a very foreseeable set of consequences.
So to interject real quickly, it sounds like we have a massive investment ahead of us. Somehow we're going to have to invest in the grid. So to you, Mr. Monahan, this investment is going to have to come from somewhere. So unless we find a way to generate less expensive energy and drop the price of energy generation, and so like i.e. natural gas, that price is ultimately to build out the grid and build this infrastructure. Unless we invest, you all, the private sector invests in cheaper energy so that the price goes down on the back end, the ratepayers will have to subsidize this otherwise. So the only way that we'll be able to pay for all this investment is to, again, invest in privately bringing energy costs down. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think in my testimony too, we look at the way Pennsylvania is structured now, and it's attractive to us and as us as Caithness and as other people in the similar business are looking for markets that way. So that makes total sense. And as you mentioned, and as my testimony mentions, demand is on the rise. You have many devices in your home. I grew up in a house that had one refrigerator. I now know everyone I know has a chest freezer in their garage or something. So, and electric vehicles is adding another component to that. And we just need to, for us, having the experience that we have in developing gas projects, wind projects, solar, geothermal, all of these projects, it's a problem that we're interested in helping solve. So we're here for that, and right now we're, looking at Pennsylvania for any other opportunity where we can help.
Thank you. What I'm hearing is frack, baby, frack, and drill, baby, drill.
Representative Ledbetter.
Thank you, Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for testifying this morning. I appreciate you all coming out. To your left and to our right, there's an aerial photograph of Salem Township. And if you were to zoom out from that, you would also see Berwick Borough and much more of Columbia County and Luzerne County. You see businesses, small businesses, homes that have seniors and hardworking families, and then all that beautiful green surrounding it is the testament of how important agriculture is to our region. Agriculture is very important to me as well, as I'm sure it is to my colleagues here this morning. I'll be analogous and some context first, and then my question will follow. In ag, even those not directly involved in it have a tremendous amount of reliability in it. Most folks expect there to be food in the grocery stores when they go there. And in a similar manner, even those indirectly involved in energy have an expectation when they flip the switch, the lights will come on, or their phone will charge, or power will be delivered. Yet, just like as we see in agriculture, there are undue and unnecessary burdens placed on that industry and sector that make food production harder and more expensive. We're seeing here in the Commonwealth undue and unnecessary regulations placed on the energy sector. And with that in mind, knowing that we have unnecessary burdens and participation in programs like RGGI, as stakeholders, could you concretize for us or elaborate briefly with each of your perspectives as stakeholders what Pennsylvania exiting RGGI would look like and how that would benefit each of you within your perspective prerogatives?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the short end, if you look at all the states that are in RGGI, Pennsylvania would be the only energy-producing state. So it really never really made practical sense for Pennsylvania to be a RGGI state. I mean, Pennsylvania's up there with Texas and Wyoming as the leading energy-producing states. Natural gas. I mean, we lead the world in natural gas production and emissions reductions. And Pennsylvania is a key stakeholder in that. I mean, Pennsylvania is an energy global superpower. And to kind of handcuff ourselves in the RGGI system, again, it kind of good intentions run amok. So that never made much sense. I mean, I think, Pennsylvania just should not be throwing in its course of action with states that are energy consuming and not energy producing states. And, quite frankly, the states around us have been huge obstacles to Pennsylvania's energy deployment. I mean, New York and New England blocking pipelines. When it's difficult a few years ago, we probably all remember that Massachusetts had to import natural gas from Russia instead of pipelines from Pennsylvania. It's not better for American jobs. It's not better for the environment. Russian environmental standards are nowhere near what the United States are. Shipping it across the ocean. I mean, all these things that, again, are foreseeable consequences when, again, you kind of put ideology ahead of practicality. And RGGI seems like a kind of misguided in that same kind of vein. So, I think would be encouraging if Pennsylvania is not in RGGI. And I think that would be better for the state for sure.
I'll say for the Caithness perspective, Caithness came into the state assuming fair market opportunity. A RGGI type program would be extremely damaging to our plant's economic viability. As we said in our testimony, we made $1 billion investment. It's a multi-decade payback, and that would significantly change what we had planned when we came in. So we're already doing what we can to reduce emissions. We're already highly regulated and interested in producing as clean emissions as possible. And RGGI, as it's written now, will not help us do that any better than we are already doing that today.
As a consumer, this can only hurt us. I look at the states that want us to join this, and like you said, they don't produce, they take. We'll be subsidized for the big cities, for New York City, for the cities in Maryland and Washington D.C. I just look at this, again, I'll push this MS4 thing. I mean, we've been sued by, was it Maryland? We're being blamed, for polluting the Chesapeake. It would be the same situation with this. And actually, I'll just leave it with this. Does anybody know about the Aberdeen Proving Ground? It's the military proving ground at the top of the Chesapeake, and they've proved every weapon except nuclear weapons, including shooting them into the Chesapeake. But I never see them brought to task. So I think this is a bad idea, and I think this PACER thing is a bad idea. And I think we need to do exactly what this gentleman said. We need to have private investors and all of these things. And the ones that work, they'll get the investment. The ones that don't work, they'll go by the wayside.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Representative Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got two questions. First, you referenced New York and their moratorium on anything reliable energy. New Jersey, obviously the same. I have an aunt who lives in New York, and I remember many years ago, she told me that once sort of the energy boom in Pennsylvania kicked up, that traveling near the southern border of New York, she said it was transformative, right? Watching northern tier Pennsylvania towns that had, been dying for a century, watching them rebound, come back, new jobs, new life, new investment. And she said then, a couple miles over on the New York border, those dead towns are still dead. Not getting into the PA New York policy differences, but just from the opportunities for more of that expansion in the northern tier area of Pennsylvania. I have people who own properties up there as investment properties or what have you. And when they reach out to energy companies, typically they get told, there's not a demand there yet. There might be opportunities for growth down the road. So what are the limitations on growth within, Pennsylvania's northern tier area? Is it limitations on market demand? Is it permitting? Is it tax structure? Is it just kind of waiting until the market is right to expand on that areas? What opportunities are there for growth in the northern tier of Pennsylvania? And are there limitations that we can kind of streamline to help develop that growth in the long term?
I think along the northern tier, and this really would be applicable to the entire state, pipeline development is huge. I mean, that's what helps open up new markets. We have too many stringent permitting regulations on that, or again, sometimes other states, like the Penny's pipeline was canceled going into New Jersey would be an example. I mean, those, people think of the first pipeline, but much like a highway, you build the main artery, and then all these little veins shoot off of it. So that's an important opportunity. In the longer run, we might see those hydrogen hubs could help create a market for natural gas, particularly the one in the PA, West Virginia, Ohio, Arch 2. But I mean, I think in general, Pennsylvania, I mean, I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know, but our tax structure has never been particularly business friendly. And that's not specific to energy, but those are opportunities, I think, that finding helping build the infrastructure to increase natural gas opportunities and a better tax environment overall would probably be the two main things you could do as a legislator.
Yeah, to bolster what he said, that's what when we look for a site, we're looking for access to high voltage electricity as well as the gas pipeline, because part of the development of these projects is also we also end up inevitably upgrading the local transmission and having to build larger substations to accommodate the generation station and those sorts of things, or tying in previous projects I've been a part of. We extended pipeline to neighborhoods that didn't exist before. So we look for where these pipelines are accessible, where the high voltage transmission lines are, and that's a big part of our decision. So I guess what I'm saying is supporting of those types of projects, transmission upgrades and pipelines would be helpful.
And part two, and Director Butler, I'm going to pick on you again just because you mentioned this point, talking about grid reliability and this massive rapid force shift to sustainable energy. And I put it in quotes because the sustainable energy industry is anything but sustainable, right? It wouldn't exist if you didn't have draconian EPA and totally unrealistic mileage standards. It wouldn't exist if you didn't have states mandating it, right? How many other industries do we see mandating, right? I mean, you don't have the government stepping in and saying you have to have this many coffee shops per capita, right? So they're mandating to prop up this industry. And then you also add in the massive taxpayer-funded subsidies on the state and federal level. The industry doesn't exist, right, without the government sort of intervention. And the disappointing thing is it's anything but sustainable, because when you look at it from the bigger perspective of what does it actually cost, right? You look at the difference between a well pad. I have the Humble generation plant in Shamokin Dam in my district. There's a pipeline. Most people have no idea that pipeline exists. But you look at a rare earth mineral mining site, and everybody knows what those look like. Most of them are now in China or in Chinese-owned industries. You look at the battery, the American jobs that you guys create versus the Chinese slave camps that build half the batteries that the world produces. So the comparison between the reliable energy industry and the sustainable industry couldn't be more stark. So going to what you said, if we continue down this path, what happens to the grid if Pennsylvania and everybody else on the eastern, everybody in the PJM grid says, hey, EVs by 2030 or we're taking your cars away? What happens to the grid? Are these lights on? What happens in the winter? Or do we have people leaving to Florida because they can't afford heat in the winter? What are we looking at here if that sort of mass exodus from the reliable energy industry to the sustainable industry happens because of forced mandates on the state and federal level?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's almost impossible for us to comprehend what a truly unreliable grid would be like. That's nothing anyone has in their living memory. Someone mentioned earlier, we all take it for granted. And look, it's complex. How energy gets into this, how these lights are on, we just flip a switch. But everything that goes in behind that to make that happen, make that as reliable is, it's complicated. And when you kind of create these policies, when you create these mandates, they don't match up with what the grid can reliably deliver. It's like watching a slow motion car accident. You could see it's about to happen, and you're just screaming, can't anyone put on your brakes? You could see what you're about to hit. And again, nationally, California is probably the closest example we have to, we had it in Texas in that storm, but kind of on a day-to-day basis. I mean, California is headed toward a situation where they'll be dealing with rolling brownouts, where you'll have to very consistently monitor your usage of energy consumption at different times of the day. I mean, as you kind of got to, without the type of battery capacity storage, windmills don't blow when the wind isn't blowing, and solar panels don't work at night. And so that energy, that unreliable, we know that that's not a surprising one. It's an unreliable source. So even if you were to increase, if even you get to the grid to be completely reliable on solar and wind, hypothetically, you would still need, for every megawatt of energy that they're delivering, you need a corresponding baseload power. So you'd still need all the natural gas, coal, and nuclear to be available when the wind isn't blowing, the sun isn't shining. So it's just a series of things like, why are we doing this? But I mean, to be clear, I think we are headed toward a calamitous situation if we were to continue kind of unabated down this path without factoring in the investments that are needed in the grid. And again, there'll be no refuge in Florida because there's only a few. They'll be facing the same thing eventually themselves. So it's really kind of a nationwide problem that's being exacerbated by states one at a time trying to one up each other in some sort of race to green revolution or whatever politics is driving this.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you guys very much for your expert testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Barton.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, gentlemen. Dr. Polidora, it's nice to see you again as well. And my background's in energy. I'm in the coal, oil, lubricant, and our family has a couple 100 meg power plants, coal-fired power plants, waste coal plants. And the reason I tell you that's twofold. One, you won't hear me use words like concretize, Representative Ledbetter.
Thank you, Rep. Barton.
And also, I serve on ERE, Environmental Resources Energy, and recently this summer I toured the PJM and overheard multiple times reliability, and low cost. Cost effective is probably the word they used. Reliability and reliable energy and low cost. And I thought, wow, the constituents of my district would like that. I think the constituents of every district want low cost and reliable energy. It's clear for that. And what we're hearing is this continuous push for alternative fuels, and no one's opposed to that. But when we take a look at where it started, where did green energy start from? And arguably it's Germany, right? Germany, right after World War II, they made this push. And they haven't succeeded at it. I mean, just this past summer, wind turbines got torn down, and they were getting Mr. Butler, you shared with the Germany and getting cut off from the Russian sanctions caused them to not be able to get their propane and nat gas. But they were tearing down perfectly good wind turbine fields for what? To mine coal. They needed to do that, and it's that mentality that is ridiculous, that we think we can just survive on alternative energy. And I guess the thing is, we're not demonizing that, but we need to embrace all energy sources, I think. And I'll go back to Mr. Monahan. Some of the comments you shared with are, nat gas plants 60% efficient, and I jotted down some notes, so if I mess them up, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. And greenhouse gas emissions are down 44%. So I guess my questions are a couple-fold. With greenhouse gases emissions down 44%, would you say we are being good stewards to the environment? With nat gas plants at 60% efficiency, are we efficient? And as Pennsylvania being the #2 energy natural resource in the United States of America, is it fair to say that, or would you say, I don't mean is it fair to say, as expert, would you say, is natural gas a reliable and low-cost energy source for us to depend on?
Yes. It is.
All the above.
To all the above, yeah. I mean, I guess to expand on that a little bit, it's, to me, as we all talk about energy transition, that natural gas is part of that. And what we're doing with the gas turbines and the steam turbines in our facility, it's pretty incredible that we've gotten the power plant to 60% efficiency, because that's, as an engineer by degree, that's what I've looked forward to is making things more efficient, more reliable, and natural gas does that for us. It's clearly in the greenhouse emissions reduction has helped us have a cleaner environment, and it's abundant in this state. So if there's other opportunities for us to put more plants like ours, we support our plants. We're excited by that.
Thank you.
All right. I have a few questions. If any other. Oh.
I was just going to quickly add to that. The United States leads the world in emissions reductions, and we've been doing this, since this incredible energy revolution of natural gas leads the world in energy reductions. More than 50% of global emissions can be traced back to 20 cities, 17 of which are in China. The other 3 are Moscow, Istanbul, and Tokyo. Again, we should take a great deal of pride in what we're doing to improve our environmental circumstances, and we're doing it mostly with American natural gas and Pennsylvania natural gas.
Representative Marcel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much to the testifiers for being here today. I also wanted to thank Representative Cabell for hosting us in his district, and to Representative Ledbetter for hosting me in his district while I was getting lost coming here. But I wanted to just make a few comments and ask a question. So, Mr. Monahan, I saw in your statement that you were talking about how your, your facilities have flexibility to help meet the demand and adapt to some of the new technologies, such as hydrogen, carbon capture, which is great to hear. I was actually at a Hydrogen Hubs event that occurred in the Southeast in Northeast Philadelphia a few weeks ago, that the Steam Fitters hosted. It was very interesting because it was a very full room. There are a lot of people that are supporting these technologies, yet there were still protesters there. And they saved their act for when Governor Shapiro showed up. But it shows us that even with some of the technologies that might be able to help us in the future, that there are still people that don't like whatever is suggested at any point in time. And so I find it interesting that you had mentioned that in your testimony. Do you have thoughts on those technologies and some of the ways that we might be able to help encourage them within Pennsylvania in the future?
I guess my thoughts on specifically hydrogen blending. Our gas turbines are already capable of burning hydrogen, blending with our natural gas, which we all know would reduce our emissions even further. Our challenge on hydrogen specifically is obviously getting it and its availability. We're a little bit aware of transporting hydrogen. We do use hydrogen in our facilities for generator cooling. So we're cognizant of the cost of the commodity, but we are very supportive of using that, and we're talking to different manufacturers that are developing technologies for that to support that, because we do want to be good stewards of the environment. Our gas turbines also, we mentioned carbon capture. That would be a significant investment into the facility to add the equipment required to do that. But certainly in our footprint that we have here in Salem Township, we have significant property that would allow us to make that development if that were the case. But absolutely, from an engineering operations standpoint, we're looking forward to seeing what technologies are out there to help in the energy transition and to provide cleaner energy using natural gas and the resources that are available to us here.
Okay, thank you. And to follow that, I found it interesting that, again, we had people kind of saying no to whatever is suggested, despite Pennsylvania being an energy leader, and that we're seeing continued emissions reductions, as we mentioned, all of you were talking about earlier. The second question that I had is that, we've seen a lot of news articles about the governor's new energy proposal, which is similar to RGGI, essentially, just Pennsylvania's version of RGGI. And it was really interesting, actually, to hear about how townships may have increased energy costs, which makes so much sense. Our school districts, our county, like there's so many government offices, and I had not thought about those increased costs for taxpayers, that on top of consumers seeing increased costs, we also have municipalities, we have a lot of different buildings and operations so all of us are feeling the effects of inflation, but taxpayers are paying. It's like you're essentially paying for your own bills and you're paying the tax increases as well. And I found that extremely interesting. So thank you for sharing some of those numbers with us. I have, because of the governor's energy plan being introduced, I have been thinking a lot about two things. One is when you look at New York as an example, because of some of the targets that they have, which may be similar or different from the governor's plan once it actually comes out as an official bill instead of just like a talking point. But New York has these grand plans, but when you look at some of the headlines in the last few months, one of them caught my eye, which was protecting consumers from surprise energy bill increases. So we have surprise bill increases from energy policies that made those bill increases happen. And I don't want to see that in Pennsylvania at all. I think that New York has created unrealistic mandates that cannot be met. And now they're subsidizing consumers because they're worried about people being hurt. And I don't want to see that in Pennsylvania. So my question for you is, what should we be doing in Pennsylvania to ensure that we have affordable, reliable energy going forward, and that we're not a year from now thinking about how we can subsidize consumers and municipalities and businesses because they're hurting because of the policies that were enacted?
Yeah, I mean, New York's a great cautionary tale of what ought to be avoided. I mean, in short, mandates, avoiding these hard mandates is probably the best way to avoid these sudden price increases. I think there's some merit to, if we were to go down these paths, that to highlight and on your utility bill how much of this is due to a mandate, so people can be more educated as to. It's easy to look up legislation, but some of these unfunded mandates, they don't necessarily appreciate how that bill got to them, so they could be better informed consumers as voters to take that into effect. Hey, this is what the powers that be thought I should be paying for this, and maybe I take that into account in the voting booth. But I think mandates, and again, a lot of subsidies to things that aren't economical at the moment. I mean, all those things, eventually trickle down to the consumer, and again. The obvious offset then is to come up with programs to help, but then again, everyone's kind of paying, as you're alluding to, 2 or 3 times essentially. Your own bill went up, the government office's electricity bill goes up, which you pay as a taxpayer, and then helps subsidize your neighbor's bill. And so ultimately the consumer and taxpayer pays for all of that. And so again, those kind of cost-benefit analysis, really are important. And again, to get into every nook and cranny of those things, so again, people can really project out, if we do X, it's going to cost Y. Is everyone comfortable with what we're doing and why we're doing it?
I guess using the Reggie example, when I think about what can be done to help us or support the ratepayer, I mean, when I look at these types of programs, what it does to our economic viability is it makes our costs. It raises our costs. That example would raise our costs in turn, which would raise our price of a kilowatt or megawatt produced. So supporting us and supporting policies that keep the market fair as it is, keep us here and keep other investments here is helpful.
Thank you.
As a consumer, it's my understanding of this nuclear plant. My brother's a nuclear engineer. Don't they have to subsidize this green energy in some fashion? You guys would know this more than I, but the cost, if you didn't have to do this, your cost would be a lot less. But I think that needs to be taken out of this whole equation. Other forms of energy production should not be subsidizing some other form. The other thing is, as a consumer, if I don't believe in this, which I don't, then I shouldn't be supporting someone that does. If they want to, what's that called? Virtue signal, by all means. Like that one program I looked at there, I guess maybe it's more for those people to pay to be on green energy things. Fine, let them do it. And the other thing we need to do is avoid these. We need to keep federalism. New York's doing their thing. It ain't working. Let's Pennsylvania do something and say learn from their mistakes.
Thank you very much.
All right. Anyone else have any questions? I have a couple questions, but I want to make sure everyone else is good first before I go forward. So thank you to all the testifiers for being here. I really appreciate the conversation that we've had. I think it's been insightful. I think it's been helpful. One of the themes that I think we come out of these types of hearings is the remarkable benefits that Pennsylvania Energy brings to the table, and how we are making the world a better place with our energy. The benefit to consumers, I think it's universally recognized. The benefit for jobs is universally recognized. But something that was touched upon here that I think ought to be talked about more often is also the benefit to the environment. And something that's, that does not get enough attention at all is over the course of the last 20 years, there's been, $9.5 trillion of investment in renewable energy. $9.5 trillion, and it's gone from 3% to 4% of the world's electricity output. $9.5 trillion. And what we also don't seem to recognize is the increase in pollution coming from where these things are being built. Our policies are sending more demand for goods being produced in places that have absolutely zero environmental regulations. None. So when the governor talks about green policy and making things cleaner, or Democrats in the state house talk about green policy and making things cleaner, they could use the language and they could talk about it, but what their policies are objectively doing is increasing demand for Chinese pollution. That's what's happening, and that's what we have seen. The more that we have unreliable grids in Pennsylvania, the less manufacturing that we can do in Pennsylvania. The less manufacturing we're doing in Pennsylvania, the more demand there is for manufacturing from places that pollute. You mentioned the places earlier today, Mr. Butler, and I appreciate you mentioning that, because I think it's been more or less universally recognized that the fossil fuels we use in Pennsylvania are more reliable than renewables. It's recognized that they are less cost than renewables. The subsidies, prove that in and of itself. The benefit has always allegedly been that there's environmental benefit. Well, that's fake too. There isn't an environmental benefit to this. We're actually increasing carbon emissions and clothing ourselves in green righteousness at the same time. Like, it's just we're paying more in every way, and we're getting less in every way with the energy policies that we are putting forth today. And one thing I do want to touch upon as far as a question on property taxes, Doctor. You mentioned property taxes.
Yes.
And in my community, I have a nuclear power plant in my back home. And they actually fund a third of the local school district. And within that school district, there's also a solar field. And that solar field takes up lots of acres. And they are paying $453 a year in property taxes. Now, they're not putting out the same amount of energy. Obviously, it's a nuclear plant. But the nuclear plant paying hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars a year in property taxes, as opposed to $453 a year. You'd mentioned that there was a solar farm, and I'd like to just get a better understanding of how does that work? Are they just taxed, not taxed, or is it agriculturally taxed? How does that tax system work?
You can tax land, You can tax buildings. You can't tax the equipment in a building. So they'll say that the solar farm is equipment. So you can't tax that equipment. And that's really what it is. And what we found was that exactly. I mean, we had a situation where the only person that was going to make something maybe would be the landowner, but we would have had to change the zoning. The people around the area did not want it, and that sort of thing. And it was even you would call it a brownfield, so to speak. I mean, it was an old stripping type of a thing. Yeah. But you just look at it, and the other thing is, well, can't you give us any payback on our money? Like decreased electricity? Well, no, because it gets sent, as you know, it gets sent. It's fungible, I guess. Electricity is like money. So no, that's another thing. I mean, is there any way to, tax these things or actually have an impact fee? Like you had, like the reason the people in the northern part of the state did well is you had impact fees. So what about impact fees for, quote unquote green energy on the people who live around the area? It could be guaranteed low in electric. If you had that kind of a thing, people would say, wow, okay, we'll do that.
It's remarkable that we don't even get a win locally. With what's going on. I mean, we are paying for it through subsidies. We're paying for it through tax dollars. We're paying for it through the rates, and we don't get a benefit from it even at a local level. It's something that's just remarkable. I'm hard-pressed to find what are we getting out of this that is a benefit. I'm sure there are people getting very wealthy off of this, and I'm sure their margins are ridiculous considering the slave labor that they use to make these things and to mine these things, and considering there's no consequence to how they get rid of them. Decommissioning solar has not been a topic of discussion. I'm sure it will be once we end up with these fields being not being used anymore in 10 to 20 years, and what we do with all of these panels that we're putting out there. I'm sure it'll all be part of the conversation, but my goodness. It is remarkable of how little, if any, if there is a benefit to what we're doing, and how much we are putting into this is just, it's incredible. So I wanted to just, Mr. Monahan, I wanted to ask you a question briefly on this. You mentioned how efficient your plant is. And you may not be an expert in how plants are run in other places and other parts of the world, but quick question, do you think that they run plants like yours is run in places like China?
Well, I haven't been to China, but I do work with global corporations. For instance, General Electric is the manufacturer for our facility, our gas turbines, our generators, and they have generators all over the world. Some of the same people that work on our generators also fly, maybe not to China, but to other places around the world. So understanding it's the same equipment, I expect them to operate similarly. As far as what's on the back end of their stack and what's coming out of their emissions is up to their state, I suppose. So I expect the equipment to operate the same, yes. How they handle the emissions, I don't know.
Okay. Mr. Butler, do you have any understanding of how they handle emissions? I mean, the numbers are pretty glaring as far as the top 10 polluted cities in the world are all in China. I'm just curious if you could add any color to that.
Yeah, I would say just in terms of emissions, I mean, that's certainly where they fail. Again, I don't know how much penetration American companies have within China on those types of turbines and generators, but the end result is pretty stark. I mean, again, if the United States, if the entire Western world went zero emissions tomorrow, all these UN goals that we're supposed to hit, China and India alone would push us past that. That is how dramatically they are exceeding any reasonable approach to getting their environmental house in order.
And our energy policy is actually driving demand for those emissions.
Yeah, you hit it right on the head when you said that the making it more costly to do business here, to do manufacturing here, it's going to go somewhere. And if it goes to places that have little to no environmental standards, we're doing greater harm to the environment globally than if we were doing it here for sure.
And this is my last question. It's for you, Mr. Butler, and this might be a longer answer than just a couple minutes here. So maybe we can talk at some other point. But PJM, it was mentioned earlier about PJM and how they're complaining and they are concerned about the grid. And in some regards, that's the arsonist complaining about the fire, because some of their policies certainly did not help with the whole grid situation. And I'm curious, and full disclosure, I've met with representatives from other states that are not in PJM, and I'm curious, what would the process be for Pennsylvania pulling out of PJM?
That'd be a longer discussion. I don't really know all the kind of mechanical procedural steps would have to be taken to remove yourself from the grid, and again, the type of planning you would need to be able to transition smoothly, so it didn't really affect families and businesses here. I'd be skeptical of our ability to seamlessly pull that off, I guess. Hopefully not being too pessimistic. But actually the process of withdrawing, I'm not quite sure how that would mechanically happen.
It just seems like we're subsidizing their fantasies in Pennsylvania of the other states that are involved in the grid. And
yeah, as each state kind of makes its action, and PJM tries to respond to this or that or hit other federal requirements, it becomes a kind of a jigsaw puzzle they can't really put together, if you will. So that, kind of like, Reggie's supposed to be this cooperative effort. You should really kind of flip the script and figure out how to do that in a more collective, collaborative manner, and get that straightened out. That is something that you could maybe do with our peer states that are part of PGM. That would be a far more useful endeavor to take on.
Well, I thank the panel. This has been a very informative conversation. Representative Cabell, if you'd like to give some closing remarks, and I'll give brief remarks on the way out, and we'll go from there.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Again, thank you to the testifiers here today. I think the tone of this, we've been doing a bunch of these hearings across the state, and we're hearing a lot of the same. But it's nice to hear from different stakeholders in different parts of the state. But generally, the tone and the understanding is that, again, we need to focus on continuing to utilize the resources that we have here in Pennsylvania, cut the red tape, and we need to be a net energy exporter out of Pennsylvania. Once that happens, we continue to open up for business, for manufacturing. Again, that will cut down on the emissions as far as China or India or anywhere else where we have no control whatsoever. Let's control what we have here. We start locally, we go statewide, then we go nationally. So I love what's happening here locally. That's why we're here. Salem Township, again, is open for business. This community. You're going to start to see a massive transition in this community over the next decade, and it's due to the great leadership and the long-term thinking that's happening in this area. So I want to thank Salem Township. We didn't mention Ernie Ashbridge. He's one of our supervisors. He's in the back of the room, so I want to thank him, and I want to thank the rest of the staff here. Amy Evans, the manager. Fantastic location, and it's really exciting. I'm new to representing this area. I'm new to representing the district, but this part of the district is really it's really booming and it's exciting. So I'm really thrilled to be a part of it, and can't wait to help us grow. So again, thank you to all who being here, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for bringing the committee here.
Thank you, Representative Cabell, and I think we established further that the world is a better place when we're using Pennsylvania energy, and when we're using energy from this region, from Southwest Pennsylvania, from across the entire Commonwealth. And we are going to continue digging into these issues of how energy and consumers and how it's impacted and how we can help. How we can help consumers deal with their energy bills, consumers from my grandmother that's on a fixed income to manufacturers that we want to see come here. And we're also going to need to do some changing to our tax code. I know that was referenced, but we're working on net operating losses so people can invest in this Commonwealth without being punished, which is how we do it now, which is very unfortunate. But anyway, the Policy Committee will continue our series of hearings across the state to discuss consumer-focused energy policy. On April 2nd, we'll be in Blair County with Representative Gregory. On April 3rd, we'll be in Armstrong County with Representative Major. Until then, this committee is adjourned. Thank you.